Sunday service, my granddaughter guided me toward the back pew and said, "You spoil everything with that gloomy look. No wonder Grandpa walked away." I said nothing, but at the end of the service, I asked the pastor for a moment and took the microphone. "I'm glad you're here today. Stay with me until the end and tell me in the comments which city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story reaches." I never imagined the person who would hurt me most would be someone carrying my blood, not after everything I'd already survived. That Sunday morning began like any other. I woke at 5:30 a.m., my joints protesting as I slowly made my bed. A habit formed over 50 years of marriage, one I still kept even 5 years after Thomas left. I put on my best navy dress, the one with the tiny white flowers. Respectful, simple, perfect for church. I pinned my silver hair into a tidy bun and added a touch of lipstick. In the mirror, the lines on my face reminded me of all the quiet storms I'd endured. For decades, the church had been my refuge, the one place I could breathe, pretend things were steady. Even after Thomas chose someone much younger and walked out, I continued showing up with my head held high. No one needed to know the details. No one needed to hear the words he threw at me on his way out. My son James waited outside in his SUV when I stepped onto the porch. He didn't come inside anymore, always in a rush, always distracted. "Morning, Mom," he said without looking up from his phone as I climbed in. His wife Patricia sat in the back beside their daughter, my 17-year-old granddaughter, Celine. "Good morning, dears," I said warmly. Patricia nodded politely. Celine didn't lift her eyes from her phone. The drive was silent, except for the soft music on the radio. I used to bake cinnamon rolls every Sunday before church. Now, James didn't even take a cup of coffee when he came to pick me up. When we reached the church, Patricia and Celine hurried ahead. James walked beside me, not with me. "There's a difference." "Can you speed up a little, Mom?" he muttered. "We're always late because you move so slow." I pushed myself to walk faster, my knees protesting. But I refused to let my eyes water. Blanche Watson does not cry in public, never has, never will. Near the entrance, my friend Martha waved. "I'll save you a seat," she called. Before I could respond, Celine stepped right in front of me, irritation written all over her face. "Grandma, we're sitting with the Millers today. Dad wants Mr. Miller to invest in his business, so you'll need to sit somewhere else." "Oh," I said softly, "that's fine. I'll sit with Martha. And please don't stop to chat with everyone," she added. "You always slow us down." I nodded. "Of course, dear." Inside, sunlight poured through the stained glass, scattering colors across the pews. James spotted the Millers and waved. I took a step toward them, but Celine spun around. "What are you doing?" she hissed. "I thought I was sitting with you," I said quietly. "I already told you there's no space." Her tone was sharp. There was space. Plenty. Before I could speak, she set her hand on my shoulder and pushed me toward the back. "Just sit with the others back there," she said loudly. "You always slow things down with that sad face. Honestly, that's probably why Grandpa walked out." The world paused. Right there in the church aisle, organ playing, people settling into their seats, her words knocked the air from my lungs. James and Patricia pretended not to hear, already chatting with the Millers. Martha appeared beside me, gently taking my elbow. "Come sit with me, Blanche," she whispered. I followed her, my mind repeating Celine's words over and over. During the service, Pastor Roberts spoke about truth and forgiveness. The irony was heavy. All these years I had forgiven. I had stayed quiet. I had protected everyone but myself. When the offering plate reached me, I placed my envelope inside, my usual 10% of my small pension, something I'd never missed. But as it passed from my hands, something in me shifted. For years, I gave to my husband, to my son, to this church, and never once asked what I was supposed to receive in return. And what had I kept for myself? Nothing. Not even my dignity. As Pastor Roberts closed his sermon and invited anyone with announcements or prayer requests to come forward, I felt myself rising. My legs moved before my mind caught up, carrying me straight down the aisle. Martha whispered my name in confusion behind me, but I didn't stop. "Excuse me, Pastor Roberts," I said, surprised by the strength in my own voice. "May I speak to the congregation?" He blinked, startled, but stepped aside. "Of course, Sister Blanche." As I stood at the pulpit, I saw James lose all color in his face. Patricia froze, her eyes wide. And Celine, my granddaughter, who had pushed me aside less than half an hour earlier, stopped mid-eye roll, stunned. My hands gripped the wooden edges of the pulpit. 70 years of swallowed words rose inside me. For the first time in decades, my voice belonged to me. "Good morning, brothers and sisters," I began. "Today I want to talk about truth, and about silence, and about how dangerous it becomes when we treat them as the same thing." The sanctuary went utterly still. This wasn't the Blanche they knew, the quiet widow who brought homemade bread to potlucks, who sat calmly in the middle pew, who never raised her voice, never asked for anything. But today I stood tall. Today they would hear me. "Many of you have known me for years," I continued, "but few of you truly know me. Because for most of my life, I allowed others to tell my story for me." I saw James shifting in his seat, Patricia whispering urgently to him. Celine just stared, stunned. 45 years ago, I stood in this very church and married Thomas Watson. I promised loyalty and devotion, but 5 years ago, Thomas decided our vows no longer applied to him and left for a much younger woman. A murmur rippled through the room. The broad strokes of that story were known. The rest wasn't. "What you don't know," I said softly, "is that our marriage was broken long before he walked out." My voice trembled for a moment, but I refused to stop. For decades I endured things no woman should have to face. I turned my gaze directly to Celine, who looked like the ground beneath her had vanished. "Just this morning, my granddaughter said that I drove my husband away with my long face. Let me tell you where that expression came from." I slowly rolled up my sleeve, revealing the faint scar running up my forearm. Gasps filled the room. "This scar is from the day Thomas threw me into a glass table because I asked about lipstick on his shirt." James stared at me as if seeing me for the first time in his life. It was the first he had ever heard of it. "And that wasn't the only time," I continued. "There were ribs I said I hurt in falls, eyes I hid behind sunglasses, marks I covered with long sleeves even in the middle of summer." The sanctuary was silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling fans. I stayed because that's what women of my generation were taught to do. I stayed to protect my son from the truth. I stayed because Thomas controlled everything, including our finances, and he made sure I feared starting over. Tears finally spilled down my cheeks, but my voice never broke. When Thomas left for someone younger after 40 years, he told everyone I was distant, sad. The problem. He rewrote our history to make himself look blameless. I turned my eyes to James, and I let him. James's expression crumbled. Patricia sat frozen beside him. "Your father was not the man you believed him to be. He was not driven away by a difficult wife. He was a man who caused harm and expected me to remain silent, and I did." For far too long, I took a breath, steadying myself. After he left, I hoped the three of us, my son, my daughter-in-law, and I, could build something new, but the damage was already done. You grew up believing his version of me. You married someone who saw me as a burden instead of family. I let my gaze fall on Patricia, whose face had gone bright red. When Thomas walked out, James and Patricia let me stay in the home I had built and cared for over 40 years, but made it clear that it was out of duty, not love. They never asked why I seemed withdrawn. They never questioned the version of events Thomas had fed them. I turned back toward the congregation. Every Sunday, I come here to worship with my family, only to be treated like I'm in the way. Today, my own granddaughter told me my face was the reason my husband walked out, and pushed me to the back pew so I wouldn't ruin their chance at impressing business contacts. Celine's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm not sharing this to humiliate my family," I said gently, and I'm not asking for pity. I'm sharing this because at 70 years old, I am finally tired of carrying secrets that were never mine to protect. Tired of being painted as the villain in a story written by the person who hurt me. Pastor Roberts stepped beside me, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Sister Blanche," he said softly, "thank you for your courage. Your pain is seen, and so are you." I nodded, wiping my eyes. For decades, I believed silence meant strength. I believed protecting others from the truth was my responsibility. But today I understand. My silence never protected the right people. I looked straight at Celine, my voice softening. "My dear, you don't know me. You don't know why certain sounds make me jump. You don't know why I still wake in the night shaking, even though the man who hurt me is gone. You've been taught a story about me that isn't true." I stood taller, feeling lighter than I had in years. From this day forward, I'm choosing truth, even if that means worshiping alone, even if my family continues to believe Thomas's lies instead of my reality. I will not lose my voice again. As I stepped down from the pulpit, the room erupted. Some cried openly, others stared in stunned silence. Several older women nodded slowly as if they, too, recognized pieces of my story. Pastor Roberts raised the microphone. "Let us pray for Sister Blanche and for healing in her family." I returned to the pew beside Martha, who wrapped an arm around me. I didn't look at James, or Patricia, or Celine. I had spoken my truth. What they did with it was no longer my burden. While the congregation bowed their heads in prayer, I kept mine lifted, eyes open. For the first time in my life, I wasn't hiding. I wasn't pretending. I was simply Blanche wounded, but standing. After the service, everything felt like a blur. People approached me with soft words or uncertain looks. Some didn't know what to say, and I didn't blame them. What do you say to someone who has carried decades of pain alone? Near the door, I saw James with Patricia and Celine talking hurriedly, casting glances my way. I wondered if they would leave without me. I was ready for that possibility. I was ready for anything now. The church slowly emptied. Some touched my shoulder gently, others whispered support. Martha stayed right beside me, a quiet shield. "Do you want me to drive you home?" she asked. I was about to accept when James started walking toward me alone. Patricia and Celine had already stepped outside. "I'll drive Mom home," he said, voice tight but steady. Martha looked at me for permission. I nodded. "It's all right. Thank you, Martha." She squeezed my hand, then gave James a look filled with something between warning and judgment. The church was nearly empty, just me, my son, and Pastor Roberts gathering hymnals at the altar. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" James asked, voice trembling. I sighed, feeling every year of my age settle into my bones. "What would it have changed, James? You worshipped your father. He was hurting you," he whispered. "Those times you said you fell or bumped into something." "You were a child," I said gently. "It wasn't your burden." "And when I wasn't a child anymore?" he said, his voice breaking. "When I was a grown man with a family of my own? You still kept his secrets." I looked at him, really looked at him. He had Thomas's height, Thomas's jawline, but my eyes now shimmering with pain he never knew existed. "By then the lies had become our normal," I said softly. "You had built your own image of your father. I didn't want to take that away from you, even when he left us, even when he convinced you I was the problem." "Even then?" he whispered. I nodded. "Some habits are hard to break, James. I protected him for 40 years. It becomes instinct." We sat quietly. Through the stained glass, I could see Patricia pacing in the parking lot. I could see Celine in the car, face hidden behind her hair. "I don't know what to say," James finally admitted. "I don't know how to process any of this." "You don't have to say anything," I replied, "and you don't have to believe me." I stood, picking up my purse. "I didn't tell my story today for you, or for this church. I told it for me." As we walked toward the exit, Pastor Roberts approached us. "Sister Blanche, "Brother James," Pastor Roberts said gently, acknowledging us both. "If either of you would like to talk more, my door is always open." "Thank you, Pastor," I replied sincerely. James only gave a stiff nod. The ride home was silent. Patricia sat in the back seat with her arms tightly folded. Celine stared out the window, her cheeks still streaked from crying. No one spoke because none of us knew where to begin. When we reached my small house, the one Thomas had left to me as a parting gift after taking most of our savings, James pulled into the driveway but left the engine running. "We'll see you next Sunday," he said flatly. I looked at him, then at Patricia and Celine. "Will you?" I asked softly. No one answered. "I meant every word I said in church," I told them. "If you decide it's easier to believe Thomas's version of my life, I'll understand. But I won't apologize for finally telling the truth." Patricia cleared her throat. "Do you have any proof of all this?" she asked. The question hurt, but it didn't surprise me. Patricia had always favored Thomas's charm over my quiet reality. "Besides the scars on my body?" I said calmly. "No, Patricia. People like Thomas don't tend to leave paperwork behind." James flinched at my wording. Hearing it applied to his father was like swallowing glass. "There is a box," I said suddenly as the memory surfaced. "In the attic. I kept some things I collected in case I ever found the courage to leave." "What kind of things?" James asked quietly. "Photos of the injuries, a few hospital reports where I lied about how I got hurt, some journals, and—" I hesitated. "Letters from other women." James stiffened. "Other women?" "Your father's secretary wasn't the first," I said softly. "She was simply the one he chose in the end." For the first time since the church, Celine spoke. "Can we see the box?" I looked at her, her young face clouded with shame, confusion, and something like regret. "Yes," I said. "Come inside." For a moment, I thought they might refuse. Patricia's lips tightened as if she wanted to protest, but James was already turning off the engine. One by one, they followed me into the house. They rarely entered anymore. Everything looked exactly as Thomas had left it, the same old furniture, the same faded curtains. I had never changed anything. Partly because I couldn't afford to, and partly because some part of me still felt frozen in the life he abandoned. "I'll get the box," I said. "It's in the attic. James, can you help me with the ladder?" As James pulled down the attic stairs, I could feel Patricia's eyes scanning the house, the water stain on the ceiling, the worn-out kitchen, the quiet sadness sitting in each corner. Was she seeing it differently now? Not as a place kept by a difficult old woman, but as a place that had once been a cage. The attic was warm and dusty. I pointed to a corner where a plain cardboard box sat among holiday decorations and old suitcases. "That one," I said. James picked it up carefully, as if it might break apart or explode. In a way, it did. Back in the living room, I placed the box on the coffee table and removed the lid. My hands didn't tremble. "I haven't looked inside in years," I said quietly. After he left, I thought about throwing everything away. But something stopped me. The first thing I lifted was a small photo album. I handed it to James. "This is what your father did to me," I said. "This is what I hid from you." James opened the album. Patricia and Celine leaned in. The first photo showed a younger version of me with a swollen eye and a split lip. The Polaroid date read, June 15th, 1979, James's 8th birthday. Celine gasped. Patricia covered her mouth. James stared, turning each page slowly. Every photo peeled back another layer of a history he never knew existed, documented injuries matched with dates he remembered as happy times. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Mom, I had no idea." "That was the point," I said gently. No one did. I expected things to change after that Sunday. What I didn't expect was the silence that followed. 3 weeks passed. My phone never rang. James didn't come to pick me up for church. No one checked on me, not once. It was as if I had disappeared from their world. Still, I went to church each week, taking the bus that stopped 2 blocks away. Martha saved me a seat. People who used to barely nod now greeted me warmly, especially the women. Some gave me looks that said, "I understand," without saying a word. "Have you heard from James?" Martha asked one Sunday as we walked out together. I shook my head. "Not a word." She frowned. "That's not right," Martha said firmly. "No matter what they think right now, you're still his mother." My story. As if everything I'd revealed was some tale I'd made up, not the reality I had carried for decades, but I understood why people framed it that way. It was easier for them. A story can be questioned. A story can be doubted. It doesn't force anyone to confront their own choices. "They need time," I murmured. I was saying it for myself, not for Martha. "It's a lot to take in." "Time is one thing," Martha said, "but being abandoned is something else entirely. Do you want me to call him?" "No," I said quickly. "Please don't. They'll reach out when they're ready." "If they're ever ready," a small voice whispered inside me. That evening, I sat on my porch swing, watching the sky melt into pink and gold. Mr. Henderson across the street waved as he picked up his mail. I waved back, grateful for someone who still acknowledged I existed. Then a car pulled into my driveway. For a heartbeat, hope flared. James? Celine? But no, it wasn't their car. A sleek black sedan I didn't recognize. When the driver stepped out, my breath caught in my throat. Thomas. He looked older, of course he did, but still had that sharp, polished presence that once drew me in and later destroyed me. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his clothes crisp and expensive. "Blanche," he said, using that smooth voice that had always been able to switch from charm to coldness without warning. "We need to talk." I didn't invite him inside. Some boundaries should never be crossed again. "Say what you came to say, Thomas," I replied, staying seated on my swing. He climbed the 3 steps to my porch, still surprisingly agile for a man nearing 75. "James called me," he said. "Told me some interesting things you said at church." James hadn't called me in 3 weeks, but he'd called his father. The sting was sharp and deep. "I didn't say anything that wasn't true," I told him. Thomas gave a smile that never reached his eyes. "Come now, Blanche. You've always had a flair for dramatics, showing off old scars, telling stories about me mistreating you. It's sad. What are you trying to get out of all this?" "Get out of it?" I repeated. "I'm not trying to get anything. I'm done protecting you." He sat down in the wicker chair beside me, uninvited. "You're hurting our son with these lies," he said coldly. "You're confusing our granddaughter, all because you're still resentful that I left." A familiar feeling rose in my chest, fear, shame, doubt. The same cocktail of emotions I had lived with for years. For a moment I felt the old version of myself slipping back in, but I wasn't that woman anymore. "Get off my porch, Thomas," I said, my voice steady. He blinked, surprised. "Excuse me?" "You heard me. This is my home. You're not welcome here." His expression darkened instantly. I recognized that look, the one that always preceded the worst moments of our marriage. "You ungrateful." "Be very careful about your next words," I cut in quietly. "Mr. Henderson has already noticed you're here. He's quite protective of his elderly neighbor." Thomas glanced toward the street. Sure enough, Mr. Henderson was pretending to trim his hedges while watching us closely. "You've lost your mind," Thomas hissed. But he stood. "James is right. You're just a bitter old woman making up stories for attention." The ache in my chest sharpened. "Is that what he said?" My voice wasn't angry, it was hurt. Thomas smirked, pleased. "More or less." "He's embarrassed, Blanche. They all are. Your little performance at church made you the talk of the town, and not in a flattering way." I closed my eyes briefly, steadying myself. "I don't believe you." "Call him," Thomas said. "Oh, wait. You can't. He's not answering your calls, is he?" He chuckled. "Face it, Blanche. They've chosen me. They always will." He walked down the porch steps, returned to his luxury car, and drove away. My hands trembled in my lap. That night, for the first time since everything happened, I tried calling James. Just as Thomas had predicted, the call went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I possibly say? The next morning, I got a text from an unknown number. It was Patricia. Please stop contacting us. James is very upset by your false accusations about his father. We need space from your drama. False accusations. Drama. The words sliced right through me, but they didn't surprise me. Thomas had always been a master at twisting the truth. I set my phone down, staring at it for a long moment. Then I did something I had never done in my entire life. I blocked them. All of them. James, Patricia, even Celine. If they wanted distance, they could have it. But this time, it would be on my terms, not theirs. For the next 2 months, I lived in a quiet limbo. My family cut me off completely. Thanksgiving came and went without an invitation from my family. I spent the day with Martha and her daughter instead, grateful for their kindness, yet painfully aware of the empty places where my own loved ones should have been. Christmas approached with the same quiet ache. To keep from sinking into loneliness, I volunteered at the church food bank and joined a weekly Bible study Pastor Robert started. The women there were kind, but I could sense their uncertainty. Some wondered whether I was a brave truth-teller, and others wondered whether grief had clouded my judgment. I felt their questions even when they weren't spoken. One freezing evening in mid-December, I returned home from the grocery store and found a small package waiting on my doorstep. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a silver photo frame. The picture was one I'd never seen before. Me in the hospital, holding newborn Celine, my face glowing with pure joy. Tucked into the corner was a tiny note. I found this while cleaning my room. I thought you should have it. I'm sorry, Grandma. My vision blurred as tears filled my eyes. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It wasn't a promise that everything would be okay. But it was something a small crack in the wall of silence they had built around me. That night, I placed the photo on my bedside table and slept more peacefully than I had in months. Maybe all was not lost after all. Winter slowly gave way to spring, and with it, my heart began to thaw. Celine's photograph became my most cherished possession, a quiet reminder that not every bridge had burned completely. I hadn't heard from her since, nor from James or Patricia, but that tiny gesture. It gave me just enough hope to hold on to during the long, quiet nights. You seemed different today, Martha said one warm April morning as we walked home from church, more at peace. I smiled, surprised by the truth in her words. I think I am. Have you heard from your family? She asked gently. No, I said, but I've stopped waiting for the phone to ring. I've stopped holding my breath every time a car drives by my house. Martha nodded, pleased. That's real progress, Blanche. At the corner where we usually parted ways, Martha heading east to her daughter's house for Sunday dinner and me heading north toward my quiet home. She paused. Would you like to join us? Karen always cooks more than she needs. Thank you, but not today, I said, surprising both of us. I have plans. What kind of plans? She asked with a teasing smile. Oh, nothing exciting, I laughed. Just some sewing. I'm working on a quilt. It sounded small and ordinary when spoken aloud, but the project meant everything to me. I was stitching together scraps of fabric like pieces of my life, turning something broken into something whole, something that would outlive me. Well, don't stay away too long, Martha said, hugging me before heading off. When I reached my house, I saw my next-door neighbor, Mrs. Abernathy, struggling with heavy bags of potting soil. Without thinking, I hurried over. Oh, Blanche, you're a lifesaver, she said, handing me one of the bags. These felt lighter in the store? I laughed and carried a bag into her backyard, where she'd prepared flower beds. I'm planting dahlias and zinnias, she said proudly. They'll bloom all summer. I admired her plans, remembering how I had once loved gardening too, before Thomas mocked it as playing in the dirt and told me my hands looked rough. Slowly, I had given up that joy, the way I had given up so many small pieces of myself. I used to grow beautiful roses, I heard myself say softly, deep red ones that smelled like heaven. Mrs. Abernathy's face lit up. I have the perfect spot for roses on my south fence. Would you help me pick some varieties? I'm hopeless beyond marigolds." Before I knew it, I had spent the entire afternoon in her garden, hands deep in rich soil, planning climbing roses, discussing mulch, feeling sunlight on my face. By the time I returned home, my clothes were dusty, my cheeks warm, and my heart lighter than it had been in years. That evening, as I washed the soil from beneath my fingernails, I caught my reflection in the mirror. The woman staring back at me wasn't the same one who stood shaking at the church pulpit 5 months earlier. Her shoulders were straighter, her eyes were clearer. There was color in her cheeks. I was changing inside and out. The next day, I did something I'd been considering for weeks. I picked up my phone and called Alice Henderson, the real estate agent whose signs I'd seen around town. "I'd like to sell my house," I told her when she answered. "Oh, are you moving in with family?" She asked pleasantly. "No," I answered gently but firmly. "I'm downsizing, looking for a place that's just for me." It was time. This house held too many ghosts, too many shadows of who I used to be. Every room echoed with the memory of Thomas's temper, my fear, and years of pretending everything was fine. I needed a fresh start. Alice worked quickly. Within a week she had the inspector scheduled, professional photos taken, and the listing ready. "It's a solid home in a great neighborhood," she assured me. "It'll sell fast." She was right. The listing went live on Monday. By Thursday, I had 3 offers all above the asking price. The market was strong, especially for smaller homes like mine. I chose the highest offer, a young couple expecting their first child. They had written a letter about wanting to build their family in a home with good bones and history. I hoped they would fill it with the warmth and laughter my house had always lacked. As word spread about my move, something I never expected happened. People from church began showing up at my door. Not out of curiosity, not out of pity, out of genuine kindness. Pastor Roberts brought boxes he'd collected from local shops. Women from my Bible study gently wrapped my old china in newspaper. Martha organized a small team to help sort my things, what to keep, what to donate, what to let go. "You've got quite the support system," Alice remarked one afternoon as she watched them all working. "I do, don't I?" I replied, still a little stunned. After feeling invisible for so long, I was suddenly surrounded by people who wanted to help. One Saturday in early May, I was sorting through a box of old photographs when the doorbell rang. Martha answered it. "Blanche," she called softly with a cautious tone, "you have visitors." I looked up and froze. Celine stood in my living room, shifting nervously. A young man stood beside her. "Grandma," she said, her eyes scanning the boxes around the room. "You're moving?" I set the album aside. "Yes, the house sold last week. I close on the 30th. "Where will you go?" she asked, her voice suddenly small. "I found a little garden apartment near the church," I said. "It has a patio where I can grow flowers." I nodded toward the young man. "And won't you introduce your friend?" Celine blushed. "This is Noah, my boyfriend." Noah stepped forward, hand extended. "It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Watson. Celine talks about you a lot." His warm smile felt genuine. "Please, call me Blanche," I said. Martha slipped out discreetly, giving us space. Celine cleared her throat. "I got into State University. I start in the fall." "Congratulations," I said. "You've always been bright. What will you study?" "Psychology," she replied almost defiantly. "I want to understand people, why they act the way they do." I recognized what she didn't say aloud. She wanted to understand her family, her grandfather, her parents, and me. "That's a noble goal," I said. "Would you like some tea?" "I haven't packed the kettle yet." She hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, please." As I moved toward the kitchen, I felt a strange wave of déjà vu. How many times had I used tea to soften tense moments? But this time, I wasn't trying to smooth over fear or hide pain. I was simply being a grandmother welcoming her granddaughter. A small step, but a meaningful one. 2 years passed, and everything changed. My little garden apartment became a true haven. The patio overflowed with color, roses climbing the trellises, herbs spilling over terracotta pots, a comfortable chair where I watched the sunset with a cup of tea. I had found peace in my solitude, strength I didn't know I had. The fragile woman who once shook at the church pulpit felt like someone from a different lifetime. The doorbell rang, pulling me from my thoughts, right on time. Celine had inherited my punctuality, though she didn't realize it. "Grandma!" she exclaimed, wrapping me in a warm hug, a gesture that still surprised me, even now. "I brought sandwiches from that deli you love." "You spoil me," I teased, guiding her inside. She now visited at least twice a month. At first, our conversations had been careful, tentative, like walking on thin ice. But eventually, the ice thickened beneath us. "How are your classes?" I asked as we sat at my little dining table. "Challenging," she said, laughing softly. "This developmental psychology course is incredible, but the professor is brutal." She took a bite of her sandwich. "Oh, Noah says hi. He's stuck in a study group." I nodded, genuinely disappointed. I'd grown fond of Noah, kind, respectful, and thoughtful far beyond his years. "And how are your parents?" I asked gently. Even after everything, that question still lingered awkwardly in the air between us. James and Patricia remained distant figures in my life, present only through Celine's updates but keeping their own firm distance. Celine sighed. "Dad's buried in work. Mom's planning some charity gala." She hesitated. "They asked about you." My heart tightened. "Oh?" I said carefully. "Mom wanted to know if you were coming for Thanksgiving this year." I set down my glass. "I didn't know I was invited." "You weren't," Celine admitted, looking uncomfortable. "Not officially, but I told them I wouldn't come unless you were welcome." Noah agreed. I reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Celine, I don't want to cause tension in the family, not after everything." "You're not the one causing anything," she said firmly. "They are with their stubbornness." I recognized that expression, her chin tilted with the same defiance she once aimed at me. Now, it was aimed for me. "Your father is complicated," I said gently. "He built his identity around a certain picture of our family. When that picture shattered, it shook something inside him." "That still doesn't excuse how he treated you," she insisted. "No," I agreed. "It doesn't. But understanding isn't the same as excusing." She studied me for a long moment. "Noah says you have this incredible ability to understand people without enabling them. He says it's rare." I smiled, touched. "He's a very perceptive young man." "And he says I'm lucky to have you as a role model," she whispered. Then her voice cracked. "I'm so sorry for how I treated you, Grandma, for believing horrible things about you, without ever asking your side." "You were 17, I said softly. "You believed what you were told." "But I was cruel," she insisted. Tears gathered in her eyes. "What I said to you that day in church, it was unforgivable." "Nothing is beyond forgiveness, Celine. Nothing." I squeezed her hand again. "And I forgave you long ago." We finished our lunch, moving to easier topics. Her upcoming internship, the community garden project I was helping lead at church, a book we had both read. As she gathered her things to leave, she paused at the door. "There's something else," she said quietly. "Grandpa Thomas, he's sick." I froze. "Cancer." She swallowed hard. "Dad didn't want me to tell you, but I thought you should know." The news hit me harder than I expected. Despite everything Thomas had done, hearing of his illness stirred a mixture of emotions I couldn't easily name. "I'm sorry to hear that," I said softly. "How is your father handling it?" "Not well," she admitted. "He's in denial. He keeps saying Grandpa is too strong to lose this fight." She hesitated. "The doctors don't agree." I nodded. James had spent his entire life idolizing Thomas. Losing him would shake the foundation of everything he believed. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "If there's anything I can do..." She nodded, hugged me tightly, and left. 3 days later, my phone rang early. Unusual. James's name flashed on the screen. For the first time in 2 years. My hand trembled as I answered. "James?" "Mom." His voice was strained, raw. "Dad's gone. He passed last night." I closed my eyes. "I'm so sorry, James." "There's a service on Friday," he said mechanically. "West Lawn Cemetery, 2 o'clock. I hesitated. "Would you like me to come?" Silence stretched, then barely audible. "Yes, I think I would." The service was simple. Thomas had outlived many of his friends, and his decline had been too quick for anything elaborate. I sat quietly in the back row wearing a modest navy dress. James stood stiff beside Patricia, accepting condolences with a mask of composure that looked painful to maintain. Celine spotted me immediately and came to sit beside me. Noah followed quietly. "I'm glad you came," she whispered. "Dad needs you, even if he doesn't know it yet." Afterward, while people milled about, James approached me. He looked older, wearier. "You didn't have to come," he said. "I came for you," I replied. "Not for him." He swallowed hard. "Celine says you're doing well. Your new place." "I am," I said. "It suits me." Silence fell again, thick with things unspoken. "Did you ever hate him?" James asked suddenly. I thought carefully. "Sometimes," I admitted. "But mostly, I pitied him. He was deeply unhappy, and unhappy people often spread that unhappiness to others." James's expression finally cracked, his eyes shining. "I don't know how to reconcile the father I thought I knew with the man you described, with what I saw in your box." "You don't have to," I said gently. Both sides were real. He could be charming, giving, even loving. And he could also be harsh. People are complicated, James, even the ones we love. A single tear slipped down his cheek. "I should have believed you." "Yes," I said softly. "You should have." He looked at me, then really looked, perhaps for the first time since he was a child. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "Maybe we don't fix it," I said kindly. "Maybe we start fresh. Something honest. Something real." Patricia approached cautiously. "James, the minister is leaving. He wanted to speak with you." "I'll be right there," he said. He turned back to me. "Will you stay a while? Maybe we could talk more after everyone leaves." "I'd like that." As he walked away, a strange lightness settled over me. Not joy, there was still too much pain for that, but something like possibility. The beginning of healing. That night, sitting in my small garden, watching stars blink alive in the sky, I thought about redemption. Not the dramatic kind from movies, the quiet kind, the slow kind, the kind that grows like a seed and takes root in its own time. My life had been broken and rebuilt, like a mosaic made from shattered pieces, imperfect, uneven yet beautiful in its own way. For the first time in 72 years, I was living free, without hiding, without secrets, without fear. I had found my voice, and with it, my freedom. For me, that was redemption enough. Now I want to ask you, the listener, what would you have done in my place? Have you ever lived through something similar? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read everyone. And on the final screen, I'm leaving 2 more of this channel's favorite stories, and trust me, they'll surprise you.